Let's.
So why don't you tell me your names first? I know TJ, I met him.
I'm Alicia.
Alicia.
I'm Quinn.
Quinn?
Yes.
Okay.
Mustaf.
Mustaf.
I'm Chloe.
Chloe?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Nice to see you.
First, how much do you know about us? What TJ said?
Yeah, just a little bit. So why don't you give me a kind of a summary of what you've been doing this for a while, like a couple of years?
Yes, this is going to be the 4th year. Yeah. This prize has been. We were learning about Nobel Peace Prize winners, and as part of the curriculum for this class is to put on our own Peace Prize.
Okay.
And so we are having nominees come in so we can interview and maybe get information to see if you could be a potential winner. And we are looking for people who are breaking down barriers to justice, democracy, peace, and sustainability within the community.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sounds good. And then you have, how do you pick the people that you interview? Because TJ said my name came up in the car wash. I thought that was an interesting way to, yeah.
We are open to nominations in the public, so anybody who knows somebody who is doing what I said can nominate. And so we are throwing a car wash for a fundraising, and someone said they knew you or heard of you.
Good. Okay. And so do you you award the prize before the end of school? Is that right?
May 23rd.
May 23rd.
It's the Portland Peace Prize Day.
Okay. All right.
And that's from 6 to 8 p.m.
At Mercy Corps Baptist Center.
At
We
downtown.
Wait a minute,
have a poster for you. Yeah, we have a flyer for you.
Oh, good.
So, yeah, if you'd like to attend. And if you would like a booth to sit up there too to get your information out, if you're still doing things for the community.
Yeah, okay. Sounds good.
We do have questions, and at the end, we would like to have questions from you.
Okay.
If you have any. Our first question is, just tell us about yourself and what you do through your work to make the Peace Prize, or to make Portland a better place.
Right. I have been involved in various aspects of peace work for quite a while. I came to Portland in 1978, and in the late 70s, 79, 80, there was a lot of increase in nuclear weapons that were being sent up to the Trident submarine base, and through our church, which was at that time St. Luke Lutheran Church in Southwest Portland, we had a group that started trying to join the protests that were going on to prevent they were sending the trigger mechanisms for the missiles that go to the Trident submarines through here on a train, large train that came through pretty frequently. And we protested their transit going up to that part. It's up the far end of Washington State, up on the peninsula. And so I got involved. Earlier, and I'll start by saying what really started me on this path is I grew up in a town called Richland, Washington. Hanford, you may have heard of Hanford, where nuclear weapons were produced for the Second World War. And I saw, after having gone through college, graduated from college, and then I went to Vietnam. I got drafted in the military and went to Vietnam. And after seeing that, I really firmly started resisting all war and violence. And so that was a real change in my life at that time to work for peace internationally and locally. And so during that period, in the early 80s, we began to do education, learning about this, and then we learned that there was groups up in Seattle that were resisting the nuclear weapons as well, and so we joined in that protest. So that was kind of what started my process. And then later on, I started to learn more about, well, in about 1980 when Ronald Reagan was elected president, he, in his middle of his first term, started essentially wars in Central America, because he saw that Nicaragua particularly was that a change of government in Nicaragua, and he called it a communist government, and he started a military action to essentially turn that over. And a number of us got involved in refugee support, new immigrants coming to our country during that period of time from Guatemala and El Salvador. And we tried to support them in what we call the sanctuary movement. And I was involved in that. And then at that same time, there was an organization that started in Portland by a man named John Whiteneck called Generations for Peace. And I got very involved in that because I saw that as a way to positively, not just protest, but to positively do something for young people particularly. And the idea of this group was marvelous in the fact that it started what we call the World Survival Council. And we included businessmen and civic leaders and just regular citizens in trying to find ways that would positively affect our community by peaceful efforts and not by war. And as part of that, we had an annual celebration called Interdependence Day. Instead of just Independence Day, it was Interdependence Day. And we we became large enough that we had collected enough money that we awarded scholarships to students, to seniors, based on an essay that they wrote on the importance of world interdependence and cooperation. And so I think the first prize was like $2,000 at that time in the 1980s. $2,000 went a long way for college. And then the second prize was $1,000, third prize was $500, I think. So anyway, I was involved in that, and Independence Day was a lot of fun. We had a big celebration, had a lot of music and legislators and people that were in government speaking that supported this idea. And then the whole Central America thing arose for me. And I went to Nicaragua in 1987 and to be part of a delegation that that explored having a sister city relationship with one of the towns in Nicaragua called Corinto. And instead of, again, just protesting the war, we found ways to do peaceful work by helping develop their hospital. The hospital was badly, it was made in the World War II era, and it just needed a lot of work. It was falling apart, and so we went down to work with the civic leaders in Nicaragua to see if we could help rebuild the hospital. And over a course of about 5 or 6 years or more, we took delegations from Portland, particularly down there. It became so popular that even our city council members, 2 of them, went on the delegation, and I went on down to Nicaragua. And so we, at the same time, Reagan's war was going on as well, and it was pretty dangerous at that time because one of the Portlanders had been killed there. Ben Linder actually had been killed. He went down as a graduate. After he graduated from the University of Washington, he went down to work on providing electricity. He was an engineer, and he worked on electricity, and he was attacked by the Contra force that was supported by Reagan, and he was killed. And so part of our delegation was going down to honor his memory and to help continue that work. So anyway, that takes us up to about, you know, in the end of the 80s and around in the early 90s. And my work really has been through, a lot has been through the church. We have a social justice group through the church I go to, Central Lutheran. And I do a lot of work on hunger relief. Bread for the World, it's an organization that works for advocacy to eliminate or to alleviate hunger, primarily in the United States, but also internationally. So we just had a letter writing campaign last week to send a strong message to our legislators that they need to support programs that make it possible for poor people to continue to get food. And those are things such as the SNAP program, the food stamp program, or the Earned Income Tax Credit, which gives quite a bit of money to families, low-income families that don't have enough to buy food. I also work at the Northeast Emergency Food Program, which supplies emergency food to families that either run out of food stamps or don't have them. And then, I guess lastly, this is kind of long, but I worked with Jubilee USA, which was a debt relief organization, an international one, but also locally, that works to help alleviate debt that poor countries have been in. They've taken loans that they couldn't repay because of corruption and so forth, and so to try to cancel those debts so people in those countries have money to go to school rather than to pay debts and get health care as well. So. And lastly, I guess my current work is to, I've been involved in trying to bring to the public the importance of climate change and global warming. And an organization called 350.org, which was started by a guy named Bill McKibben, has just recently brought it to a very high level as far as its visibility. And he's developed a program called Do the Math, where he looks at the amount of parts per million of CO2 that's in the atmosphere, which has to be somewhere around 350 if we're going to have a sustainable planet. And it's already at about 390 going to 400. So he's looking at world temperature increase and trying to make the case for that we have to do something about this now. It's not if we wait another even 5 years, and just continue life as usual as far as how much CO2 we put in the atmosphere by driving cars, by burning coal and things of that sort, we're going to be in big trouble. And so we're working with a group starting just recently that is looking at ways to put pressure on fossil fuel companies such as ExxonMobil, others that continue to make huge profits but do not pay for the CO2 and all the pollution they put into the atmosphere. And so we're trying to do it in a number of different ways to either confront the investors enough to actually go after the money that they make, or also make a case for them having to pay for at least the pollution they put in the atmosphere. So those are the primary areas that I've been involved in.
I just kind of ask you, what's your definition of peace? And
definition of what?
Of peace.
Of peace, okay.
Yeah, and what's the best way to create peace?
I think the definition of peace is
in your opinion?
is not just to avoid violence, but I think peace is more integral to how our society lives, and it has to do an awful lot, I think, with the fact that we're becoming increasingly a bifurcated society. In other words, we have a lot of money, as we know, going to the top 1%, and an enormous amount of pain and suffering going the other way. And so I think, for me, working for peace is certainly to resist war and violence, but violence also comes in other forms, such as the fact of somebody not being able to eat, get enough food that they feed their families, that there's desperation and despair. And so working to do those things, I think, that would diminish that. That would be to change the picture of how we allocate resources, to cut money going to military production, oftentimes of wasteful things that aren't even no longer used, tanks and so forth, but yet our congresspeople continue to vote for supporting these because it's jobs in their district, and very often it's a two-edged sword, one of which somebody's working, but yet they're producing something that is eventually causing us more pain and suffering. And so it's an ongoing struggle. I work closely with the legislators, if I can, to write letters, to meet with them when possible, both in Salem for our state and also in Washington, D.C. Kind of a long answer, but
so how do you think your work contributes to the community?
Well, the community, I think the work that I do locally has to do with advocating for hunger reduction by working with organizations like the Oregon Food Bank and the Northeast Emergency Food Program. I work with, one of the things I didn't put on my sheet here was I worked with a group called Northwest Pilot Project that is, in fact, we just had their big fundraiser last weekend with the walkathon. They provide low-income housing, advocate for keeping an increasing amount of housing available for low-income people within the metro area. And but they also do other things, such as provide transportation services for them to go to medical appointments or to get food. It's an organization that's they just passed their 35th birthday last year, and they do an enormous amount of work to make it possible for people who would be probably homeless if it weren't for them. So I also work with Join. I'm not sure if anybody has heard about Join. They're actually very close to here, just over here off of 82nd. They provide, their primary organization that deals with homeless issues in Portland. And our church has a relationship that was started about 2 years ago, where people that are in housing, their role is to actually work with people to try to get them off the street into housing. And I, with a number of other people from our church, have set up a monthly program where we have people. Part of the reason that people are homeless is not just the fact that they can't get in a house, but oftentimes they're so used to being on the street that when they get in a house, they don't have the relationships network to make them feel like they belong there. And so we actually work or just have social evenings, do everything from playing bingo to, to doing, showing movies or whatever with folks that are recently into housing, and so we develop a relationship with them. So those are some of the primary things locally that I do.
What challenges or risks have you faced through your work, and how was it resolved? Were you able to overcome them?
I guess the biggest risks, challenges are, sometimes the biggest challenge is getting things done that you want to accomplish, but there's barriers such as people not willing to vote to support things that I see as leading for a more peaceful world. So it's always trying to you're going against the tide oftentimes, and that can feel like a big challenge. But I mean, it's something that I continue to look at how things work out worldwide. And I always looked at Dr. Martin Luther King, Nelson Mandela in South Africa. They didn't give up. They continued to work until there was change taking place that would never have been expected at one time, but yet was accomplished. And so those are things that inspire. So, the other bigger challenges for me, and as far as my personal safety, were when I really resisted the wars in Central America and going to Nicaragua to make a statement, to actually not just make a statement, but to be in support of the people that were there, that were being, we felt, attacked by our own country here.
What specific issue made you want to dedicate your life to the work that you do?
Probably the biggest issue, started my conversation was having been essentially drafted in the military, and I wasn't drafted, I enlisted, but I didn't go willingly, but I did go, and I was in Vietnam and I saw things in Vietnam that really changed my life as far as knowing what we were doing there was wrong. And it didn't happen immediately. I mean, there was a lot of period of time where, when I first came back, that transition wasn't an immediate one, but it bubbled around and really came up later on. And my involvement in Central America came as a result of seeing the same thing happening in the 1980s as I went through in the late 60s in Vietnam. And it was a policy that I was seeing our country getting involved in something that morally I was very much against. So those are probably the biggest things and just the fact that the inequity of things, I think, is the biggest stimulus for me to see that we have enormous inequity in our country as far as people that have a lot, many people that don't have much. So I think a dedication to changing that picture is one that I continue to work on.
I kind of have a non-documented question. You said that you worked for your church a lot of the time, and did you do that when you went down to Central America, or was that through your church, or was that just by your own doing?
It wasn't through the church. It was part of the. Portland was one of 110 cities during this period of time, starting in about 1982 or 3, that through the early 90s, that developed what was called the Sister City program. And Portland had a sister city relationship with Corinto, Nicaragua, which is a port city, and a very poor port city. And so that was already underway when I learned about it. And so our mayor at that time, Bud Clark, had officially, and the city council had officially adopted a city, a sister city relationship with Nicaragua. And Mike Lindbergh, one of the early councilors, went down to Nicaragua as part of the delegation. And so my church was probably instrumental in kind of helping me learn about all this going on. I did actually taught some classes on that before I went, but it was more of a civic relationship between the two cities that developed. And there was, as I say, 110 of these over the course of time in the United States. It was quite amazing to see that. So it was really a citizen involvement that really, I think, stopped that, eventually stopped that war.
Mm. If you could nominate anybody else that you've worked with for this prize, who would you nominate and why?
Boy, there'd be a lot of people that would fit that role, I think. Locally here and doing some of the work, Susan Emmons, she is the director of Northwest Pilot Project, the one I just talked about, which provides housing to low-income people, and not only just housing, but they have a network and work with many, many churches that does everything from producing kits that are made up for people newly into a residence that they've never had anything, furniture or anything. So they're involved in getting, say, a kitchen kit set up so they can cook, or bed clothing and bed sheets and everything else. So she's been doing this for, and before her, a guy named Peter Paulson who started that program, who's now dead. But so she would be certainly one. Mark Jolin, who is the head of Join, is another wonderful. He's a lawyer that has dedicated his life to working with homeless people getting into housing. There's a number of good folks around town. But those two that stand out in my mind.
Yeah. Well, thank you. Do you have any questions for us?
Yeah, I guess the question is, how did you first learn about this when you were students? Was it part of your class that got you interested in doing this, or was it an assignment? Or
The prize or the class itself?
the class, the actual prize, or the people that get to work on this your panel here. How did it was something you volunteered to do, or you selected to do?
I'm gonna say it like this. Part of the curriculum, we all forecasted for the Peace Studies class.
Okay.
And in it, coming into it, we knew we were going to do the Peace Prize at the end of the year. Because we've learned about Nobel Peace Prize winners.
Yeah.
And we're looking for people.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, we chose to do it.
Yeah.
It's something we wanted to do.
So you've been inspired by people in the past. How many years have you done this?
4.
4 years.
I think this is the 4th annual.
And who were some of the former winners?
Do you remember their names? They got to meet the former winners. They came in and talked about their experience in the project. So Emmanuel Price, who just recently started a nonprofit called Second Chances Are for Everyone.
Okay.
Works on formerly incarcerated individuals, helping them to get their feet back on the ground. Casey Jama, who works on immigrant and refugee rights. Daniel Garcia, who works for the Resolutions Northwest, peer mediation stuff that he does with schools. And so, and then this is the 4th year.
Well, there's a lot of good things going on, so many in Portland that, you know, it's hard to even know all of them unless you spend time analyzing them. But, those are the encouraging things. The discouraging part sometimes is what you see around you, oftentimes, that I think it's kind of, you know, the refugee, that was one of the things I didn't bring up, but it's been a very big part of my life too, is refugee support. I got involved in 2 or 3 families, resettling them, bringing them, working on getting the whole family here. One from Ethiopia, that, again through our church. One that was part of the Central America, a woman who fled the violence in Guatemala and came to Portland because she knew somebody that she'd known down in Guatemala. And we continue, even after all these years, 37 years, we continue to work with that family. And, so they came here and under great duress, but you know, found a way to live a life that was with dignity. So I think that that was about all the questions, I guess. So the actual event is actually, there's a selection process, and then you have an event that awards the actual prize, and then
yes. We have a poster to give you about the event. We would like you to attend. If you'd like to set up a booth to get your word out, it sounds like you're working with multiple programs right now.
okay. So it's mainly local things that you're
Yes.
interested in, yeah.
And then it is May 23rd on the flyer. And that is when the winner will be announced. Thank you so much for coming.
You're welcome.
Thank you for your time.
And
Are you available that night?
Huh?
Would you be available to
I think I possibly can. That is a weekend that we have a family